Well, good morning again, and thank you again for being here. I tell you, I love our praise band. I know those guys don't get enough credit. Don't they? Just love listening to them. I could have just sat there on the front row and listened to them play. But I'm so glad that you're here. Memorial Day weekend, I did some research this weekend before I came, and I didn't realize that, Memorial Day weekend is a big deal, and obviously, absolutely thankful for the people and men and women that have sacrificed, but it also means, I don't know if did anybody know that it actually marks the beginning of summer, like vacation thing, and then Labor Day marks the end? I didn't know that. Maybe some of you knew that this morning. I don't know. I'm just a little slow on the uptake, but I didn't know that. But it also marks, and I tell you, when I think about our summer, I don't know about you guys, but summer, I look forward to summer, and anybody else looking forward to summer? Anybody glad that summer's here? Yes, I love it. So I love everything about it. We have such horrible. We didn't have that bad of winter, but still, it's just cloudy and gray, and so I look forward to when we can actually have sunshine and we get outside and we can do some stuff. And I love being outside, and we've got so many things going on this summer. I think that we have a lot of really exciting stuff coming with our church, but just even individually. And we have, we actually this time of year in the church world, we we actually take a step back from some of our ministries. That's why Youth Loop kind of takes a pause, and Grace Extreme and Crave, and some of the things actually we take a break from in the summer because you guys and everybody else is so busy, and we have so much on our plate with respect to what we have going on in the summer. And I think that we've got day camp. Cheryl kind of covered that, day camp and big stuff, and district assembly and general assembly, and we have all this stuff, and I have 9,000, I think I checked this morning, I have 9,281 home improvement projects that Cheryl has given me to get done this summer. And I don't know if that's you guys, but literally last year, she made a list and stuck it on the refrigerator, and I had all this stuff that I was supposed to do all summer long. And I remember Morgan and her friends, they were going to have the summer of fun. You remember that, Sasha? It was the summer, they made a list, a summer of fun, and they were going to zip line and kayak and canoe and climb Mount Everest and, swim down the Amazon. They had all this stuff listed on their to-do list of summer, and I think that we all just have all that stuff going on, and probably some of you have some of that stuff planned for this weekend in your families. We have baseball and all that stuff. Oh, and speaking of baseball, yes, we have, our Salem High School baseball team. Cole, are you the only member here this morning? Is anybody else here? Salem High School baseball team? Stand up, Cole, and be recognized. One of those star members. There's one right here. Oh, yeah, he's right here. Here we go. I like it. Yeah. I love it. So we got two guys here, but Salem High School baseball team yesterday beat Marion and won the regional championship at Salem High School. That's pretty cool. I loved it. So we got a lot of our guys. I know some of our guys are gone already with their families on Memorial Day weekend, but so all this stuff going on in summer. And so my question for you this morning is, where does God fit with that, in all of that for you? And, a real thing that you'll hear if you're around the church or anything, one of the things they talk about is the summer slump at churches, because some people really are busy, they're out doing stuff, and they don't come to church, because of different activities going on, and we have that summer. But today we're finishing up a 4-week series called Divine Direction, and hopefully this message series it's helped me really understand what God has in store for my life and how we process that. But whatever you have on your agenda or plate over the next few months, I want you to just ask yourself that question: is where does God fit in my summer plans, and how does He fit within that, and what difference can I make in my life as a result of that? And so, but I've been praying a lot about not only just the direction, this divine direction that we've been in. We're in week 4 of this series, but I've been praying not only for my own direction, that God would direct me, but also for our church. And next week I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've accomplished, and we're going to share some stuff just about Salem Grace. If you're new here and maybe it's your first time visiting today, I'll share some of that stuff next week, and we're going to talk about really where does God want us to go as a church, and how is He directing us, and how do we respond to that, and what are the next steps that we need to take as part of our church. And I really believe that God, I really believe this. I believe God has incredible things that He wants to accomplish through this body of believers we call Salem Grace, which includes all of you. And through each one of you, I think God has something for each and every one of us, and I believe that He wants to do great things at Salem Grace to help us reach lost people in our communities. But I'm convinced that if our church is going to be a significant force for Jesus, that it's not going to be because of me. It's not going to be because of your pastor. It's not going to be because of Cheryl or any of the other pastoral staff. It's not going to be because of our church board. It's not going to be because we have a really awesome praise band or we have, cool puffy blue chairs to sit on, or it's not going to be because of any of that. It's really going to be a result. We have really cool stage designs. Have you been like Corey, Ryan? You guys are doing a great job on the stage stuff, but it's not going to be because of any of that. I'm convinced that we're going to see people come into a relationship with Jesus Christ because each one of us have chosen to be obedient and listen to what God is calling us to do and where He's pulling us and what direction He's pulling us in, and listening and being obedient to that. And I believe that if we seek divine direction and are listening, really listening to what God is asking us to do, He's going to do amazing things. And I don't know what that looks like for you. He may be asking you to do different things. And I don't know if you've ever really felt an urge to do something or to become engaged, or you felt like, man, I needed to take this job over that one, or hey, I need to date that girl over this girl, or I need to, whatever it is. We've had these things that pull us in different directions in our lives, and I believe that maybe He's calling some of you, and I say us, but I'm talking about all of us, because I think He's calling probably some of you to do something different in your life, and I don't know what that is for each one of you. And so I'll really ask you this morning as we walk through this for you to do that self-examination and to kind of figure out, where is God wanting me? He may be asking you to start school somewhere else. He may be asking you to start working out. He may be asking you to stop dating the person you're dating and start to get rid of that unhealthy relationship. He may be asking you to start over. He may be asking you to do a different job, to begin serving, to begin tithing and giving. He may be asking you to do all of those things. And I think what really, as I walk through this message, is going to be important is how we address that. How do we respond to what He's asking us to do? And I have, here's the thing. I read a quote this week, and pay attention. And the other thing that I'm going to tell you is I only have 2 points this morning. So some of you are like, whoo, yay, we're going to get out early. I only have 2 points this morning, and I want you to pay attention to those, but really want you to internalize it and ask yourself these questions. And I think the biggest problem for most people, I read this quote, is this. For too many people, it's the start that stops them. So when God is pulling you in a direction or He is asking you to do something, I think too many times it's the start. We have problems with the start. We think, okay, God wants me to do that, but I'm just not able to take that step and do what He's asking me to do. It's the start that stops us. And for too many times it's that. And I have something I want to share with you this morning. Last week, I had Brock Irwin up here, and if you weren't here last week, he's a kid that came through our youth group. He got selected for this summer camp called Big Stuff that we take kids to every year as an intern. It was a big honor, one of 16 kids that got chosen across the country to be an intern. He had to raise some money. He had to actually raise $3,000. I think we did some offering for it. Didn't take an offering, but we collected about $2,000 last week for Brock. So he didn't make all of it, but he got some of it. And really, really appreciate you guys that are being obedient. But I had somebody that was wrestling with that last week, and I got a text from this person, and I asked him if I could share this, and he said I could. But here's the text that I got this week from him, and it says this, word for word. Just wanted to share a cool story with you. I felt compelled Sunday to give to Brock's trip. I shared this with my wife, and she said that... and said how much I was feeling we should give. I said $500 and kind of got some pushback, but she agreed that if that's what I thought God was telling me to do, that it was okay with her. Not 10 minutes after we discussed this, my secretary brought me a piece of mail and in the mail was a check from an insurance company that we had 10 years ago with a check in it for $560. Pretty neat what can happen through obedience. And I think so many times we feel God prompting us to do something, and we talked about that last week in my message, the prompting of God that we feel in our life. And so many times it's the start that stops us. We hear that voice inside that says, hey, you know what, you really probably should do that. You really probably should say you're sorry. You really probably should reach out to that person. You really probably should send that card. You really ought to take that $5 out of your wallet and put it in the offering plate, or you should do that. And we hear that, we feel that in our heart, but sometimes we can't make that step. We just can't take the step. And it's the start that stops us. We can't get started. We can't get off the launch pad. And I just wanted to share that story. I thought that was cool because I think when God's obedient, for too many people, it's the start that stops them. So here's the thing. You will never finish something that you don't start. You understand that? That whatever it is, and maybe you're here this morning saying, you know what, I really need to get out of debt, and we're drowning in debt, and I bought a bunch of junk that I really don't need because I want to drive a fancy car and live in a big house that I can't afford, and buy clothes that I really don't need to be paying for, and we do things that and you maybe you're sitting here this morning, and that's weighing on your mind. It keeps you up at night, and you're thinking, you know what, man, I don't know how I'm going to get out of debt. And you may be thinking, you know, hey, maybe I should start Financial Peace University when Salem Grace operates, and I should start maybe getting a budget, but would you never start? You're never going to finish what you don't start. Maybe you're trying to get in shape. Maybe that's something you're wrestling with, your weight and the condition that you look at, and you look yourself in the mirror and you know you need to do it, you need to make that step, but you just can't make it happen. You can't make it start. I want to encourage you today to have the faith to start. And I'm going to tell you a story about a guy that I've talked about before. His name was Nehemiah, and he's in the Bible. And if you don't know who Nehemiah was, he was a guy, he was really pretty much a nobody. He wasn't a king. He wasn't like president of something or anything else. He was just a regular guy named Nehemiah. He actually was a cupbearer to the king. His job, I found out actually the first service, his job was to take the cup that the king drank from and taste it first and ensure somebody it wasn't poisoned and he didn't die. So that was his job. He laid down his life for the king and hey, it's good. I brought you your cup. So that was his job. That was all he did. I don't know how you get that gig, but I'm not sure I want it. But he did that. And so Nehemiah, here, let me tell you a little backstory about Nehemiah. He was a Jew. Jerusalem had actually been destroyed. Like, God promised the Israelites, he said, hey, I want to bless you. I want to do all these things if you follow me. And of course, the Israelites didn't do it. They didn't do anything God said and pretty much went their own way, made false gods and worshiped a bunch of false gods. And so God allowed the Babylonians, if you look at this in history, he allowed the Babylonians to destroy Jerusalem. Wiped out, all the cities would have this giant wall around the city, decimated the wall, left them completely vulnerable to their enemies. They would have been wide open. It would have been embarrassing. It would have been, it just would have been very vulnerable and embarrassing situation for the Jews of that time in Jerusalem. And it was that way for 140 years. So for 140 years, there were people that they were just kind of out there. And so I'm going to get to this. So hang with me. It gets better. So for 140 years, the walls were down. And so Nehemiah gets a picture of this. And I don't know if you've ever had a picture of something in your life where you've looked at something and you said, you know what? That's not right, and I need to do something about it. That's what Nehemiah did. He had a Popeye moment. And you know what a Popeye, everybody watch Popeye growing up? Well, he had that Popeye moment when his arms would just, he would bust out and he would say, I can't stand it and I can't stand no more, that Popeye moment. And so he had that Popeye moment when he's like, I can't stand what I'm looking at. I can't stand to see Jerusalem laying in ruin like this. And something has to be done about this, and somebody needs to do something about it, and it's me. I'm the person that needs to do something about it. I'm going to step up. I don't know what to do. It's a huge job. I'm not a contractor. I don't have skilled labor. I don't know how to build these walls back up, but something has to be done. I need to make it happen. And all over, we see that happening in today. And so we have this, he's a cupbearer, but he prays. And so what he does is he prays to God, and he says, Lord God of heaven, create a great and awesome God. Let your ear be attentive. I confess our sins, including my own. I acted wickedly toward you, but remember the promises you've given to me and give your servant success for granting this thing. And so that's what he starts with. He takes a step, and he starts with prayer. And so I think, here's the thing. I think that there have been people in our church that have done that. We have families all over this congregation that are looking at kids that are in situations and home situations that are not good. and they've been pulled from their homes, and they're running through this system, and we have families in our church that have looked at these kids and said, you know what, I can't stand it, and I can't stand no more, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to do something about it. They've taken kids into their home. They've gone through 9 weeks of foster parenting classes, and they continue to take these kids into their home and provide a safe place for them. And then it's because people are feeling God pulling them in a direction and saying, you know what? I can't stand that any longer, and I need to do something about it. We have grow groups and people in our church that look at kids around Christmas and don't know that they have, and see that they don't have basic necessities as part of, food, clothes, clothing, and stuff like that. And so what do we have here? So we have a candy cane project. That wasn't something that was started by the staff or anybody else. That was started by a grow group and people that saw a need for kids at Christmas and said, you know what? I can't stand it. I'm not going to just sit here in my blue puffy chair on Sunday morning. I'm going to do something about it. They had a Popeye moment when they felt God pulling them in a direction and said, you know what, that's wrong, that's not right, I've got to do something about it. And they did something about it. I think sometimes we look at an issue and we look at a problem in our life and it seems so daunting and overwhelming, and we, how do I do something big? So how do you do something big? How do you do that? You may be asking that question. How do I do that, Trent? I see this big problem. I don't even know what to do about it. It's too big. My little bit isn't going to make a difference, and it's just overwhelming, so we do nothing. We're paralyzed by doing nothing. Interesting fact. First step, how do you do something big? You start small. That's my first point. I'm going to write that down. You start small. You recognize that this church will probably have, somewhere between 500 and 600 people that will come to church in 2 services today. We average around 600 people a Sunday that walk in and out of this place at Salem Grace. We've had upwards of 980 on Easter and special events. Do you recognize that this church, Salem Grace Church of Nazarene, started with about 20 or 25 people in a garage? They were people that said, you know what? There are people that are lost in this world. We need to start a church. We need to do something. We're going to start this church in a garage. And we're sitting here in this building and on this property that's nearly paid for and in blue puffy chairs because of the faithfulness of somebody who said, you know what? I can't see. They didn't foresee down the road that we would run 500 or 600 people or 700 people at a church. They did something small. You may have heard that phrase, how do you eat an elephant? Anybody know? One bite at a time, right? Eat an elephant one bite at a time. I think sometimes we look at the elephant and we're just overwhelmed by the elephant. We're like, man, I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. That's what Nehemiah did. He started small. Zechariah 4:10 says this, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Don't you love that? Anybody have kids? Raise your hand if you have children. Okay. When your kids were little bitty, maybe 10 months, 11 months, 12 months, years of age, and they started to take that first, drunken Frankenstein walk, it's just that, and they take that little baby step, and you were like, oh, what'd you do as a parent? Honest. Oh my goodness! Look at him, he's walking! You're taking pictures, you're calling your friends, yeah, he's walking! And your wife comes home, or your husband comes home from work, and you're like, oh my goodness, watch this! And they take one step. It's not like they're doing hurdle in the couch and, whatever. They're just taking a little step. And you lose your mind as a parent. You think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread because your kid took one little step. God rejoices when we take the same step toward him. However small you may think it is, whether God is drawing you in a direction and you think, you know what? God's telling me I should probably put something in the offering plate this morning, but all I got is $5 or $2 or $1, whatever it is, and you think it's not going to amount. God says that's a step, and I'm proud of you. He's excited for us. When we see a need and we pick up a blessing bag on our way out and we see a need outside of here and say, you know what, this is out of my comfort zone, but I'm going to go up and I'm going to talk to somebody, I'm going to hand them this bag and tell them that Jesus loves them. That's a step in the right direction, and God is losing his mind over it. That's what Nehemiah did. He started small. Let me ask you this. Have you ever done something awesome in your life and then traced your step back, trace the steps backwards to see where you came from? I think we have a tendency to look at where we are and not look back at what it took to get us there. And if you look at Nehemiah, if you look at this story of Nehemiah, at some point in time, he had to feel God doing something. God gave him a burden for Jerusalem, and he said, you know what, this isn't right. I've got to do something. He's a cupbearer. All he does is drink something to keep the king from dying. That's his job. He hands the king a cup. But he sees this ginormous problem that has existed for 140 years, and he says, you know what, I'm going to do something about it. You know what his first step was? He hit his knees and he prayed and said, God, forgive me for my complacency and my sin in my life. Then the next step, he took a step and he went and talked to the king, and he said, hey, this isn't right. I want to go fix it. I want to go to Jerusalem. He lived in a town that was about 850 miles away. He said, I want to go to Jerusalem. It's 850 miles away. Will you bless me and give me some resources and help me go? And so if you read the story, that's what happened. King gives him permission, gives him some resources, and says, go to it, man. And they build this wall. In 52 days, Nehemiah led the people of Israel to build that wall back up in 52 days. 52 days. And it'd be easy to somebody to come along and go, oh, hey, cool, you rebuilt the wall. That's awesome. Good job. And we look at that. But when you look back and you trace the step backwards from this wall, you realize that he had to take a step and talk to the king. That he had to go then, once he got permission from the king, that he had to go in, he had to get his backpack or his Louis Vuitton luggage, his donkey sacks, I don't know what they packed in, but they went in, packed his stuff, packed some underwear, toothbrush, retainer, because when you don't wear your retainer, your teeth hurt. Packed his suitcase, packed his underwear, got on a donkey and rode 850 miles away from his friends and away from his family and because God told him to do something. He was willing to take one step. That led to another, that led to another, that led to somebody laying the first brick, slapping some mortar on and laying that brick down and going, well, we're on our way. We're headed in that direction. They worked their tails off and rebuilt a wall that had laid in ruins for 140 years. Blood, sweat, and tears. The Bible tells us they actually had to work with one hand and keep their weapon in another hand. Hey, we're laying bricks. Hold on, stop, we got to fight. Let's go back to bricklaying. He had to rally people. He had to investigate the situation. He waited 3 days for permission, and then he traveled 850 miles on a donkey with his bags packed to make a difference. He started small, that led to something big. Gathered officials and priests and nobles, and he said this in Nehemiah 2:17-18. Then he said to them, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. We will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God and what the king had said to me, and they replied, let's start rebuilding. So they began this good work. Couldn't that be us this morning? Couldn't we look at that and say, you know what, Trent, yeah, let's do it. Let's, as a church, as a body of people that are sitting here in puffy chairs, take what we have and what God has done in our hearts and take it out to people who are hurting, that are struggling in broken relationships and finances. We can say, hey, it's God that we serve has done this in my life. And we can look back and see the work that, several years ago, my wife and Morgan got in a fight. My oldest daughter, they love when I talk about them. Got in a fight several years ago. Morgan said, you know what, Dad, I'm not going back to church on youth group. And my wife said, oh, yes, you are. And Morgan said, no, I'm not. And Cheryl said, oh, yes, you are. And Morgan said, oh, no, I'm not. And so, you ever been there? That's fun times as a family. Those are good times. Look back, remember those days? Anyway, I was in the living room over here in this conversation. And finally Morgan's like, well, fine, I'm not going back. And Cheryl's like, fine, you're going to go somewhere. And she's like, fine, I'll go somewhere else. And she's like, fine. And it was like, fine, fine. It's one of those situations. And then I was like, what? You're not going anywhere else? What are you talking about? I was working at the bank, had a job, worked every day, had crazy hours. Got to talking to Morgan and some of her friends and said, hey, you know what? What do you guys want to do? Just tell me what you want. She's like, well, I think it'd be cool if we just sat and talked and went over some of the Bible stories. So I was like, okay, we'll do that. Wednesday night, bring your friends. First Wednesday night came, 6 people. 6 kids showed up at my house in my basement. We ate, we hung out, talked about some Bible stories. Everybody went home. Next Wednesday, we had 3, 2 of which were my daughters. We'd effectively shrunk it by half. I'm hoping I don't have the same results with this church, that you guys all come back. But then the 3 turned into 6, and turned into 8, and turned into 10, and turned into 15, and turned into 30, turned into 50. Then somebody gave it a stupid name like Youth Loop. And it turned into 150 to 170 kids that meet here every Wednesday night during the school year. High school kids. Looking back, I didn't have the faith for that. It wasn't like I looked at Cheryl and said, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this, and this is going to end up like this. And there's going to be 150, 170 kids, and we're going to take 3 busloads of kids to big stuff every summer, and it's going to be great, and it's going to change their lives, and they're going to do all this kids. We don't have faith for that. You start small. You meet opposition, and you start small. You don't want to start small, but you do. Starting small doesn't mean thinking small. If we want to do something big, think big, but start small. The second thing I want to share, and I'm going to hurry. It's just quite simply, take the next step. Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 19 through 20, it says this. When Sanballat and Horonite, the Tobiah and the Ammonite, I don't know where they get these names, and Geshem, an Arab, heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What are you doing, they asked. Are you rebelling against the king? And I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding the wall. Just do something. Start small. Just do something. Lose 20 pounds. Start a budget to get out of debt. Start an emergency fund of $1,000. And people look at that and go, what do you mean start an emergency fund of $1,000? I can't. Are you kidding? I have $1,000. Sell something on eBay. Take your $25, put it in an account. You're $25 on your way. Start small. Grow a little closer to Jesus. Maybe you're maybe you're a guy that's battling with pornography and you can't lick it, and you've been over and over and over and you've been praying and praying and praying and fighting that battle. Start small. Tell somebody. Get an accountability partner. Start small. But just do something. I read a quote by St. Francis of Assisi. I'm going to ask the band to come. While they're coming, I'll read you this quote. St. Francis of Assisi says this. Start doing what's necessary. Then what's possible, and then suddenly you're doing the impossible. Do you like that? Start doing what's necessary. Then do what's possible. And then before you know it, you're going to be doing what's impossible. Nehemiah started small. He wasn't a contractor. He had no skills. He had no people to help him. It was 850 miles away. He had 100,000 excuses, but he built a wall in 52 days. Once you do what you set out to do, you will realize that you are just getting started. The wall was up. It only started to rebuild Jerusalem. The economy boomed. The temple boomed. God is directing you this morning. And it's time to start. however small that is, it's time to start doing something. You know, we have opportunities all over this place. We have people that volunteer their time. For some of you this morning that are sitting here this morning, you're able to sit in here because somebody is taking the time to watch your kids in the back and to provide something for them back there. You'll sit in a chair that somebody else will pick up and put up, that somebody else will get out of that room and set it back out here next week so that you can sit in it. We have volunteers that all over this church and constantly looking for more. How is God going to be part of your summer? What are you going to do something, to start? And I don't know what that looks like. That looks like something different for us all. But Galatians 6:9 says this: let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Start small. Be faithful and committed. Play hurt. Come when you don't feel like coming. Get up when most want to stay down. Do something when you feel like doing nothing. Don't grow weary, church. Dream big. Start small. But most of all, just start. Pouring your heart into this place and into other people. I'm going to ask you to stand this morning. I don't know what God is asking you to do today. And some of you may be going, you know what, he's not asking me to do anything yet. And that's okay. Some of you probably recognize this morning, though, that you need to take, the first step that you need to take is toward Christ. That you recognize right now that you're living a life that is outside of what God wants for you. And it's outside of pursuing God with everything you have. And you acknowledge honestly that you've sinned against God. And that may be where some of you are at. I don't know. Some of you, he's asking you to do something that's outside, so far outside of your comfort zone that just thought of it makes you sick at your stomach. And you're like, man, I don't know that I could pull that off. That may be as simple as something as beginning to start giving faithfully, or beginning to volunteer, or beginning to say, hey, you know, I'm going to volunteer in Youth Loop, or I'm going to volunteer in Crave. We're looking for leadership for our junior high ministry this year. It's a commitment. I know we have volunteers that help us in Youth Loop, 150 kids. I don't take any credit for that. I have a ton of volunteers that help, and they commit every Wednesday for a period of 9 months. Every Wednesday, every week, every Wednesday, every week. So what is it that God's asking you to do this summer? Where is he asking you to be? I'm going to pray with you this morning. Heavenly Father, Lord, you know each and every heart in this building. You know where they're at. You know what they're struggling with. You know the temptations that we have. You know the things that we keep hidden that nobody else wants to, that we don't let anybody else see. Lord, I pray that there may be somebody here this morning that says, you know what, the first step I need to take, and because the first step I need to just step out and take is just to step closer to you, God. I know that I'm a sinner. I'm living in a way that I shouldn't be, and I need your forgiveness in my life. So if that's you this morning, just pray this prayer with me. Heavenly Father, come into my life. Forgive me of my sin. Help me to come into a relationship with you, Lord. Begin to change things in my life. Lord, I'm taking a small step toward you. With every head bowed, nobody looking around. If anybody prayed that prayer, just lift your hand up. I just want to pray with you. Yep, I see you. See it all over this place. We pray for you. God, thank you for these people that have had the courage to take one step toward you this morning and to start doing something. Lord, I pray that you would just richly bless their life, that they would walk out of here a little bit lighter, knowing that they've unloaded the stuff that they've been carrying around and that you can help them with that. Father, I just pray there's somebody else here. Maybe you're here this morning and you'd say, you know what, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I just have kind of let myself slide. I'm not engaged. I'm really not doing what I know I should be doing. Help me to, maybe it's just I want to take a step further. If that's you this morning, just slip your hand up. Yep. Father, I just pray that that you've talked to each one of us, Lord. Help us, God, to recommit our lives to you. Thank you for your grace and your love, and thank you for being our biggest fan. Lord, thank you for cheering us on when we take that step, and help us to feel good about that. Father, I pray as we seek your divine direction in our life, Lord, that you would just continue to work in our lives, that we would continue to move this church, not so that we can say, hey, isn't Salem Grace awesome, but just that we can say, hey, people are finding help, and they're finding Jesus Christ through what we've done in our obedience and to what you've done through us, Lord. Father, I pray that you would go with us on this Memorial Day weekend. Thank you again for those who have sacrificially given their lives for each and every one of us so that we can enjoy this freedom in America, Lord. We don't take it lightly. Father, thank you so much for loving us. Thank you for this body of believers. In your precious holy name, I pray.